Wearing this shirt because an act of love took place right over there when a very dear friend of mine gave me this shirt. It says best bookbinder in San Juan, and it's not true. It really isn't. I'll tell you about it. I bind books, and I started a while ago. And somebody asked me, why do you bind books? And I told them the story of sitting around with a bunch of my friends. And they said, what was it like when you came out as gay in 1976? I said, well, I went to the Memorial Library. And they said, what? You found out you were gay and you went to the library? And I said, yes, I went to the library. And they said, you didn't get drunk? I said, no. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. I said, I went to the library. Why? Because it was so obvious to me. I had grown up with books. My father and my mother were writers. My brother is a writer. And smart people who have the answers to problems, they write books, and then they put the books in libraries. So it was very natural for me to go off and write or look in a library. Now, I tell you all this because about a week ago, I was looking, of course, at the news, and I saw a wonderful woman give a prayer service at the National Cathedral. And her name is, and I think I'm going to mispronounce this, Mariann, Edgar, Budde or Budde, I don't know. But she gave this wonderful service and had a few words for the current president of the United States. And I thought what she had done was so remarkable. And then I looked into what she had done before that and discovered that she provided a place for Matthew Shepard's last remains to be interred in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
This woman had contacted the parents and said, your son died in Laramie, Wyoming, a violent, horrible death. And you haven't been able to bury your kid's remains because you were afraid that grave was going to be desecrated. So the parents kept the ashes for 20 years until they got this call from this woman. So what does that have to do with bookbinding? 2 weeks ago I read a poem by Rilke which ended up, you must change your life. And I thought how hokey that is. And then I realized that it really wasn't. What the bishop did, or the archbishop, I don't know who she is, what she did was an act of courage, and that's something that every one of us has to do something about. So anyway, here's what I'm doing tonight. There was a guy named Bonhoeffer, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a German pastor, and he was a good theologian. And in the Nazi era, he was part of the plot to stick a bomb under the table that Hitler was sitting at. And the bomb exploded, and Hitler escaped. Bonhoeffer was sent to prison, and he died 2 years afterwards in an extermination camp. And so I thought, well, tonight's book binding is going to be Bonhoeffer, because in those 2 years he wrote a book, and that's where he wrote the famous words about cheap grace. And the quote is, "Cheap grace is the idea that grace did it all for me, so I do not need to change my lifestyle. The believer who accepts the idea of cheap grace thinks he can continue to live like the rest of the world, instead of following Christ in a radical way. The Christian lost in cheap grace thinks he can simply enjoy the consolations of his grace. So tonight I'm binding Bonhoeffer's book, and I'm going to send it off to the Archbishop, because I think that she stood up for me. As so many people stood up for me. People who sat on a stage and said, I'm gay, this is my life, and God knows this could have happened to me as well. So I thank you very much.